We'll get going. We should be live. So,
welcome everybody to another episode of the Woodall's Campground Management Podcast, Fireside Chat, whatever we're calling it this week. It changes, I can't remember, so we'll just go with Fireside Chat this time. We've got our regular host here, Ben Quiggle, who's setting up the Facebook Live, and then he's going to introduce Jason here. And then we got Kara as well from the Canadian Camping and RV Council. And so we're discussing a little bit today about RV travel, how it affects the mindset, how people decide where and what to do during the time of whatever we're going through now. And then we were supposed to have Work Camper on too, but apparently he decided he was maybe he's work camping, Ben. He could be just work camping.
Maybe he is work camping. So it's good. Maybe he
just got called into work or something. So
yeah, he was telling me that he was out of work at the moment. So maybe he found a job. So
you got a work camper who's not working to come on the show?
Well,
you're originally discussed with?
They're in between jobs because of all the travel.
You're in charge of getting whoever we get on the show. You're fired.
I know. Okay. Well, I think Facebook Live's going now, so everybody welcome on Facebook. For those who are here regularly, you probably noticed the co-host, Kara, and Brian. Kara's from the Canadian RV Council, and Brian is CEO and founder of Insider Perks, a marketing firm. And then we have as our guest this week, Jason Epperson. And Jason, I guess it would probably be easier if you just tell us what you do.
Sure. My wife and I run rvmiles.com, where we do the RV Miles podcast. And we also talk about industry news from a consumer perspective and everything that's going on in the camping and RV world. We also run the America's National Parks podcast and the See America podcast. And on those shows, we sort of tell history stories of all kinds of cool locations across the country. My wife and I and my 3 kids travel the country full time. We've been full time in an RV for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years, September 1st, we'll be full timers. And I'm coming to you from Littleton, Colorado right now in a beautiful state park.
So when you first told me you had 3 kids and you and your wife were in an RV, I was like, what kind of RV do you have? And you had mentioned last week when I first spoke to you, you used to drive around in a bus. So tell us a little bit about the bus.
That's sort of how we started our journey. We, back then, they were starting to make RVs for families of 3 that could, we really wanted an RV that our 3 kids wouldn't have to, convert a dinette or anything like that. They would have their own room and stuff. And they had been making those in the industry for a little bit, but there weren't a lot of good used options that we could afford. So we built a school bus conversion, which was a lot of fun. We spent about 6 months building it out. And the thing with school buses is that you can get them super cheap. Different school districts across the country have to sell them off. They usually have laws that after so many miles or so many years, they have to sell them off. So, it's a $100,000 vehicle that we got for $6,000 with 70,000 miles on it. And then we're able to build out to our needs and make a bunk room for our kids and all that sort of stuff. And we were in that for up until last summer. But unfortunately the engine died and I wasn't going to pay $20,000 for an overhaul. So we bought a truck and a trailer, which actually fits our needs a little bit more. And we've been traveling in a bunkhouse trailer for the last year now.
Okay. All right. And you told me that you mainly travel. So you have family on both ends of the country and you travel to visit family and, visit some different areas, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we're just sort of looking to see as much of the country as we can, and we have family sprawled out everywhere. So we actually didn't have any family in Chicago when we lived there. So when we left Chicago, we were able to start really seeing a lot of friends and family that we hadn't seen in a long time. So we go around finding people we know and cool places to visit.
So does the RV ever get small? Like, do you ever feel cramped in the RV, or do you got plenty of room?
Yeah, it does. But here's the thing, like, we were in an apartment in Chicago. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, so it was definitely roomier than what we have now. But kids are always under your feet, no matter how big your house is. They're always at you. They're always clawing at you. They're always they're near you. Their stuff is everywhere. But we like to say that the outdoors is our living room. So, that way we have a decent amount of a space often, unless it's raining.
You, Ben, because you just bought a rig, didn't you? Or you're thinking about buying an RV, or you got one? Or
No, I was just wondering. I think Jason's one of the larger families I know there are some large families that RV, and it's always interested me. I have 4 kids of my own, and it's just always interesting to me how they make it work and how it does work, I guess.
getting an RV, right? Like,
what?
didn't you tell me that? Didn't you tell me you're getting an RV?
Yeah, we got an RV, but it's a little older, and
You can cram 4 kids into there. That's what I'm saying. You just learn best practices, so you don't have to start from scratch and learn what he did.
I'm just gonna full-time RV and a pop-up camper with 6 people. I think that was.
Hey, there are people doing it. There are people. I've met a family of 12 before. I don't know how they do it, but there are people that are cramming lots of kids. Or sometimes they travel in multiple RVs. But you know what? If there's a huge difference between full-time living and just going camping and on some vacations every now and then.
Yeah.
You can put up with a lot more if it's not full time.
It actually makes sense, Ben. So, like, if you and your wife rode in the truck and then pulled like 4 separate pop-ups behind you, one for each kid, that might work.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of pop-up.
You wouldn't have the fighting. You wouldn't have the arguing. You wouldn't have. I mean, perfect. I think you do that. You start a podcast off that. Too.
I was gonna say, if this happens, you need a TV show.
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing a TV show. So I guess what we really brought Jason on was just to kind of get a perspective on RV traveling during COVID. I guess, can you give us, just to start, maybe a little picture of how the COVID crisis has impacted you and maybe the traveling you were planning to do or in your plans for the future?
Sure. So when the virus started to hit, we were in Arizona, and we were actually in the middle of going to multiple conventions. We were going to the FMCA convention and a full-time families rally, and the FMCA convention, Family Motor Coach Association, that got shut down. And we moved up it was starting to get warm. We were in Tucson, starting to get warm, so we moved up a little bit in elevation, and we were camping at a private campground called Camp Verde RV Resort.
Yeah.
Camp in Camp Verde, Arizona, and we were only supposed to be there for a week. And when things started shutting down, we started looking at our travels and deciding, we can't really do any of this. We don't know what's going to happen. All sorts of federal and state parks have shut down, and we're normally heavy federal and state park campers, but since the coronavirus began, we've been almost exclusively in private campgrounds, because private campgrounds, at least at first, were the only place you could really be. Right. Yeah. And so we actually decided to book a monthly rate at that campground, and we ended up staying there for, I think, 11 weeks. And it was great. They did a fantastic job there. At first, they shut everything down except the laundry room, and they were only allowing 2 people in the laundry room at the time. They set up hand sanitizer stations for when you enter and exit. If you had a special need for restrooms, they would let you in the restrooms, but for the most part, restrooms were closed, the pool was closed, all that sort of stuff was shut down. So we stayed put as long as we could. There wasn't a whole lot to do, and we're used to traveling every week, every 2 weeks, and we just sort of stayed put. It got very, very hot because it's Arizona. Even though we were up at maybe 5,000 feet at this point, but it was starting to become 100-degree days. So towards the end of May, we moved on to Colorado, and we're trying to take it easy and book slowly. So we booked another monthly rate and stayed for about 5 weeks at a campground near Mesa Verde National Park, which was fun because we got to visit a national park for the first time in a while, and see how the National Park Service was dealing with the coronavirus and all that. And we've only in the last few days, moved on and are beginning to start to travel a little bit quicker. So now we've moved towards the eastern half of Colorado. But it's been interesting. It's different in every area, and different municipalities have different rules, and they're changing them constantly. And we were in Durango the day Durango, Colorado decided to allow restaurants to open and all that sort of stuff, and with people wearing masks. And different towns take it more seriously than others. Different campgrounds take it more seriously than others. And then you've got the campers coming in and out that are all taking it a little bit differently. So, and we're trying to, I guess the way we look at it right now is, as travelers, that's a privilege, and it's sort of our responsibility to go above and beyond what the given area we're going to is asking of their citizens, and set an example for other travelers, and really look at it as we're guests in these communities. And we wear masks wherever we possibly can. We stay away from people wherever we possibly can. We rarely go to sort of public places other than outdoor natural places like hiking trails and national parks and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what we've been doing since, I guess, the end of March.
So how does this impact where you're going? Like you mentioned, in the last couple of days, you've just now started to kind of move on and travel from the private parks, right?
Well, at this point, we were supposed to have, at the end of May, we were supposed to have gone to Disney World. At this point, we were supposed to be
again. You can go. It's open.
And by now, we were supposed to be up in Maine. So we were supposed to have gone from Arizona all the way over down to Orlando and all the way up to Maine. And now we have gone maybe a total of 600 miles.
Okay.
So it's drastically impacted the speed at which we go places, because we're cautious and waiting for things to change, and we also don't want to get stuck somewhere again. If places, if places begin to shut down again, and we're seeing that. We're seeing states implementing new rules. We're seeing state campgrounds closing to outside visitors. We're seeing new 14-day quarantine rules in different states, and we don't want to get stuck in a situation that is difficult to deal with, and we don't want to get stuck. Like, when this all started, New Mexico was the first to shut their state parks down, but then New Mexico, along with some other states, also shut all their private parks down, and most of the other states that were doing that were states that hadn't opened private parks for the most part anyway, like states like Maine. And it really displaced a lot of people in New Mexico, and we started to see them coming to us in Arizona, and then New Mexico started allowing 25% capacity at a park and so on. But we didn't want to get stuck in a state that would do something like that. And I don't begrudge them for doing what they can to protect their citizens, but for us, we just had to be careful about where we are and not being displaced and not having a place to go. So that's why we sort of hunkered down at a private resort that we knew that would be okay for a while. And we've kind of continued to do that a little bit, but now we're starting to just, not like today here at this state park that I'm at here, we're feeling out a state park for the first time.
How much of a challenge is it to figure this stuff out, like basically in real time as you're traveling with different states and different localities and different health departments and different rules that change every week? And I mean, it's got to be a challenge. Even like, obviously you're probably got more tech savvy and more experience doing this than the average RVer.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of why we're moving slowly. Is it is a challenge. You know, we when we decided we're not going up the East Coast, we decided, hey, we want to maybe go up to Yellowstone or something. Maybe this is a good time to do that. But we're also dealing with the fact that my brother's getting married in 3 weeks in Illinois, just outside of Chicago. He only found out recently that they've only opened up to events of up to 50 people recently. So he only found out that he could do it recently. And it's going to be a very safe and social distant thing with just immediate family. But we're trying to figure out if we can even go, if I can get sent to it, or if we can travel that way. Because if we end up going then to another state that we've got a 14-day quarantine in, that could be a real challenge for my family. You know, because a quarantine is not shelter in place, right? Quarantine means like you don't go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've gone 14 days without going to a grocery store ever since getting kids.
Is that really, like, I'm just curious, is that really what it, I mean, I haven't looked into it that far, but
yeah.
Yeah.
you go to the grocery store?
No,
Yeah.
it's emergencies only. And
Food's an emergency, right?
well, no, I mean, they mean like medical emergencies. They even, in
Okay.
some states, they even say, you know, if you're supposed to get your food delivered to you, and if you can't, you know, you're supposed to place an order and the police will actually bring it to you. That's how serious they're taking it. Now, the intent of that is not for travelers. The intent of that is people who have the virus and are quarantining.
Right.
But yeah, the idea is that you don't leave your home or your RV, I guess.
So that's,
now,
I mean, that's interesting to me because I read a lot about this, and I read a lot about the quarantine and the different rules coming into different states, but I had never like seen that actually written out where, you know, I mean, quarantine understood that you stay away from people, but I always assumed that you could still at least go out for the essentials.
no, you're not even supposed to go to a gas station, which makes travel an issue, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there are major enforcement issues with that.
Yes.
And there are, I'm sure, a lot of people defying it. But, you know, to me, enforcement isn't a reason to go ahead and do something just because the police are having a hard time enforcing it. But I'll tell you, I do know that some states are really taking some serious steps, like they're monitoring flights, which is a lot easier to do. You know, obviously because flight data is publicly available to them. But I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if they ended up monitoring campground and hotel visits at some point. And in some states, the fines are very, very steep.
Is there any, Ben, maybe you can weigh in on this too, but is there any responsibility on a campground or a state park or whatever to enforce or push you to obey these things as a business, I guess?
There are requirements here in some of the provinces in Canada for campgrounds that are permitted to open to track the names and addresses of every individual in the park, whether those are registered guests, children, visiting family member, any of that. For contact tracing purposes, the public health is requiring that you keep a log of all of everyone in and out of the park.
Yeah, and I know when I talked with like people in Maine, campground owners in Maine or along the East Coast that have those quarantines, they say similar things. You know, you have to keep records. You either do it digitally or some I think are doing it on, they have paper or whatever they do it on, and they have to keep it for so long. And then
is that a health department requirement? Like, I'm assuming it is in Canada, but is that a requirement in Maine and different states like that? I mean, I feel like that's something we should probably,
yeah, that's
you, Ben, we read an article about, right? Like, I mean, that's something important that campground owners need to know.
Well,
yeah.
but yeah, I think there's a lack of communication about it, certainly here in Canada. And also, I think a lot of parks, because they're so stretched in terms of staffing, that those kinds of extras, you know, they're trying to focus on keeping things clean and sanitized and all of that. So those
are very easy.
The cracks. And then the only time it's going to become an issue is if there's an outbreak and now suddenly you don't have that data in public health, then you're going to start seeing, you know, issues in terms of fines and problems with contact tracing and making sure anyone who maybe gets exposed is informed, and that would be a massive mountain of.
What? Yeah, I guess, Jason, what's been your experience as far as going into campgrounds? What type of information are they looking from you? And like, do they give you a long list of rules and different paperwork? Do the coastal stuff?
So we haven't had that issue. And other than, you know, what's normal, we haven't had any sort of extra stuff added onto us, other than like letting us know a few of the rules that they've added, usually what's closed, and asking us to not have groups of more than so many people. You know, there have been campgrounds that say, if you, you know, we reserve the right to throw you out if you violate social distance rules, if you don't wear a mask into the store, if you have groups of 6 or 10 or more at your campsite. What I've talked to some campground owners about a bit is this lack of communication, is the confusion. I'm going to move a little bit here as I talk, because I'm in the middle of a trail and people are coming at me. That's okay. So, but a lot of these laws are written with hotels in mind, and they might not specifically call out campgrounds, or they might say things like campgrounds except campgrounds that have full-time occupancy. I mean, obviously there are a lot of campgrounds that have people that live in them full-time, right? So, but then does that law then apply to only the full-time residents? Does it apply to the campground? There's been just tons of confusion between campground owners and municipalities about that. I think it started to get better, but as each new shelter-in-place order came out, it was a heck of a lot of confusion, as you guys know. But I think the ones that we have dealt with have been in states that either Arizona, who is pretty open about allowing people to and businesses to do what they want, or Colorado here, where they're very focused on allowing for outdoor recreation. So they've really paid attention to campgrounds. So those are the only real states that we've dealt with at this point. So I can't really say that it's been a challenge for us, but I know it has been a challenge for others.
Do you as an RVer or a traveler, when you go into these parks, does it make you feel more comfortable when you're presented with rules and guidelines and the campground seems, I don't know, more organized?
It does. I mean, you know, we're especially when you know, there's a difference between following the state's rules because we have to, and really going the extra mile to protect your staff and your customers, and not just protect them, but make them feel comfortable, safe, and understanding of the rules, because nobody likes breaking rules that they didn't know about and then getting, you know, approached about it and given a hard time over it. Everybody wants to, you know, most people are willing and able to follow rules if they're given them clearly. And that Verde Ranch RV Resort did just a fantastic job of this. You know, when this first started, they instantly put all of their staffers in their park models. They stopped renting out their park models, and each of their staffers had an individual park model that was their office. They didn't interact with each other. They just talked over the phone or over walkie-talkies and all that sort of stuff. They were very clear with regular emails. They had the ability to email anybody that was on site at any given and let us know what the changes and give us updates on other things that are happening. Because, you know, on top of COVID, there are places that have to deal with other stuff. Like in Arizona and Colorado here, we've been dealing with very, very dry weather and fires.
Yep.
You know, there was a wildfire that was about 2 miles, and we actually got their fire bans are having to deal with their customers and the ones that are ignoring fire bans and all that sort of stuff and trying to keep their property safe. And there are natural disasters happening in different areas of the country as well. So I think regular business operation for a lot of campgrounds has been a challenge, not just because of the restrictions put on by COVID, but because of figuring out how to do the other things with COVID as well. When the state says pools can reopen, but only 10 people in a pool max, well, how do you enforce that? How do you have a pool that can only have 10 people in it, but you don't have a lifeguard there to say there's one too many people in this pool? And how do you say when one too many people show up, who has to leave? All that sort of stuff is the real challenging stuff that I think campgrounds are only beginning to grasp right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's confusing state to state too. Like, I mean, if you're part of an association like ARVIC and you're hearing what Michigan's doing, what Missouri's doing, what Florida's doing, and it's all different, how do you know, well, my governor's saying this, but is that really safe when this governor's saying this and this doctor's saying this and this one's saying this? Just, there's no consistency. And so associations, Kara's, have helped a little bit to disseminate, a lot, I'm not trying to insult you, Kara, at all, but I mean, a little bit sort through the confusion, right? Because there's still going to be confusion no matter what, no matter how hard the association is working. Yeah. They've helped that a little bit by disseminating information and rules and guidelines, but still it's changing so fast. How do you know what's right to even, yes, follow the rules, but like you said, go above and beyond, right?
Yeah, and I think there are challenges with laws that are written and things being forgotten about in normal times. And I think what we're learning here is that when government has to act quickly and write rules and laws and orders very fast, it's never clear. And as much as we would like all the rules to be clear, it's not going to be. And even government officials get confused by this. Just the other day, a New Mexico, and not to keep picking on New Mexico because I love New Mexico, it's actually probably my favorite state to visit, but just the other day, a New Mexico public health official went on TV and said that if you come into our state, not only do you have to 14-day quarantine, you have to stay for 14 days without leaving. Now, he was totally wrong. You can pass through. It's 14 days, and most of the 14-day quarantines are written this way. It's 14 days or the duration of your visit, whichever is shorter. But he was confusing a lot of people by saying, no, if you're passing through, you actually have to wait in New Mexico for 14 days before leaving again, which obviously is a big challenge, especially for people who maybe have a job across the border in Texas or whatever. So, but public health officials and law enforcement officials and higher ups in state governments might not all understand the orders as well. So they might be giving out false information and that's confusing as well. So we're all just flying by the seat of our pants here.
Yeah. So I guess what factors do you take into consideration when you're looking at traveling? Obviously you probably try to miss the hot spots and keep your kids safe.
Yeah, we're trying to go to, and then also as travelers, like we kind of assume that we have the virus, right? And I think that's kind of a good way for a lot of people to
act. I did that for a long time because I went to so many conventions up through mid-March that I just
exactly
assumed.
Yeah. So our whole thing is not going to heavily populated areas, and going to areas where the virus has not been raging. And that's kind of why we left Arizona, not just because of the heat, but the virus was picking up there. And the state was opening up and basically allowing, we were driving into Sedona and it looked like a normal summer day in Sedona on a weekend where you have just thousands of people out wandering and going to the shops and nobody's got masks on and anything like that, other than the fact that they couldn't dine in restaurants, which just meant they were outside on the streets congregating. So that kind of freaked us out a little bit, to be honest. And that plus the heat is what really got us moving northward towards Colorado. And we'll probably continue to move to less populated areas because, you know what, I mean, the virus has been highly politicized, but the fact is that the deaths are going down. They're able to handle it a little bit better, but more and more people are getting it, you know, and there are all kinds of estimates that like maybe 60% of the country is going to get it at some point. And, you know, we could get it, and then maybe that's not going to be a big deal for us, but we had a big health scare last year. So it kind of has, it kind of is really poignant with us. And my wife's dad has gotten the coronavirus actually twice now. He was diagnosed with it while he was ill, and he came out of it fine. But then 2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with it again. He didn't feel ill then, but that really kind of brought it home for us. So we're trying to do what we can to stay away from people and try to help, you know, stop spread it.
Do you feel like with all your podcasts, and I'm assuming you talk to a lot of other consumers who are RVing and stuff like that, do you feel like they share your mindset, or are they on the opposite side of kind of it's safe and we're just going to do as we normally do?
There's a wide spectrum of people feeling as with everything, you know.
Sure.
There are a lot of people that feel like what we're doing is extreme and dangerous, and we shouldn't be leaving anywhere. And, you know, and maybe they're right. I don't know. And they're saying that everybody should constantly be in their house. And a lot of those people are friends of mine that live in big cities. And I understand it's totally different in places like Chicago, where we're from. There are a lot of people that believe it doesn't exist, that it's not a real thing. And there have been situations where we've been out and about with a mask, and you know, people might make fun of us for wearing a mask, even though half the other people are. But I think the consensus I get from the general population is most people, even if they like to say that there's a lot of government overreach during this, most people are pretty careful right now. But the concerning part is a lot of people aren't. And a lot of people just say, you know, take what comes to me. You know, I think the thing about this is it to me, it seems like it's a disease that people spread more than they get sick from. So it's kind of all about it's kind of about how selfish you are, you know, whether you care about giving it to anybody else or just getting it yourself. A lot of people say, hey, if I get it, it's my time. But to me, it's more about us as a society not spreading it around between each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I would like, I live in my apartment in downtown Cleveland, Ohio, and I've worn a mask in the elevator and stuff like that, just go down and walk the dog, because I don't think I necessarily have it, but I don't want to give it to anybody else. And it's the same reason that I haven't seen my friends in like 3 or 4 months that have families and kids, because the last thing I want to do is be responsible for, I gave it to you and maybe you were asymptomatic, but you gave it to your kids. So I don't want that on my conscience.
Yeah, exactly. It's that weighs heavily on my mind. And I get that it doesn't weigh heavily on other people's. You know, I mean, when you're living through this day to day, you have other worries in your life, right? So sometimes other things end up taking precedence, and you're not thinking about that, and you care more about the fact that maybe you've been without a job from the beginning of this, and you're trying to make ends meet. That sort of stuff, I understand why it makes people sort of like just back off of like, I just can't handle this anymore. And I think we all as humans change from day to day. One day we might feel one way about it, and another day we might feel another way. And I think that's unfortunately, that's the importance of government stepping in and doing it the right way. And government is never great about doing these types of things, but that's why it exists. And if we just sort of all follow what we're supposed to be doing, even if we hate it, even if we think it's stupid and wrong, hopefully that means that things will get a little bit better. And I think it is getting better. I mean, you look at like a city like New York. I think I saw New York yesterday had no deaths for the first time.
Yes.
And that's fantastic. And hopefully, since it started, up there on the East Coast, that as it has waves through the country, we're smart enough to take towns like New York as an example and learn from what they've done and what they haven't done.
Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, do you feel like there's a worry that campground owners should have that if they're in an area where cases are spiking, that there's a possibility that their business could go down? Or do you feel like it's more 50-50 that the people who are willing to travel will still travel and they'll replace the people who aren't?
I think campgrounds are super busy right now, and unless this virus gets way, way worse, at least out where we are, I think they've got little to worry about. Or if there are other government controls that come in, which is I don't even know if you can plan for that. But I don't think there's a lot to worry about at the moment. I mean, I think a lot of people are camping because their European vacations were canceled, or they're just sick of being stuck inside, all that sort of stuff. But every campground that we've been to in the last several weeks, at least probably from the beginning of May on, they've definitely been full on the weekends, totally full, and pretty full during the week. So I think unless an area, even in the areas that have difficulties right now, like Florida, I mean, I don't know what Florida campgrounds are dealing with, but it seems like people, even if they're just locals, are camping a lot more. So I think that's great for campground businesses, but we'll see what happens in the fall, and when it starts to get cold again. I don't know how that might change, but as long as states don't start shutting things down again, I don't think campground owners have a heck of a lot to worry about.
It's kind of the sense I do too. So
I guess just kind of off that comment, we had somebody ask on our Facebook page if you had seen a lot of, I guess they're calling them pandemic campers, but they're basically just new campers. Have you been seeing a lot of the new campers? I think you just kind of answered that partially.
Well, I will say I have seen a lot of temporary tags on RVs. That's for sure. I've seen a lot of new RVs. Now, obviously, they could be people just replacing their old ones, but I think there are a lot of new RVers out there right now. I don't know how many people out here are brand new to this, but I think people are just camping more in general. But there certainly are a decent amount of newbies out here, and they're they're figuring this out as well, which is a challenge. There's a lot of new full-timers as well. And figuring out the full-time lifestyle in the middle of the pandemic, I imagine can't be super easy either.
So let's flip this for a second on a marketing side, right? Like if I'm a campground and you're you're an RVer, is there an opportunity for me to convince you to come to my park over other parks because I am safer or doing more things, or advertising that I'm cleaning more frequently, or stuff like that impact your mindset?
Yeah, that's been appealing to us. I mean, it's like I was alluding to a little bit earlier. It is appealing when the rules are clear, and they feel like they're sensible things that are meant to take place, that are meant to take care of your staff, instead of things that are just meant to mollify the government, so or just to keep your staff. Sometimes I'm seeing things that are just to keep the staff safe, but not the customer. So for instance, the last private park we were at, they had their bathrooms shut down, and instead they set porta potties all around the park for people to use. And they had lots of tent campers, and they had lots of cabins with no bathrooms, and they had to use the porta potties. And that was sort of just a way for them, I felt, to put the bathroom stuff off on another company, that comes in and cleans and replaces and pumps out the porta potties. And they're not going in and cleaning the porta potties like you would a bathroom daily or multiple times a day. So that sort of felt to me like you're actually making your customers less safe, and in order to not have your staff into the restrooms cleaning, which, I get, if, and I think this was kind of a place where staff is all family, and I get that. And, but that kind of stuff is a little, it's not, it's not something that's going to interest me in visiting your campground. So yeah, if you clearly let me know what's going on at your campground, how you're dealing with this, the extra cleanings that you're doing, or that sort of stuff, what's closed and what's open, that's important for information for me in the first place. Like, if you're a campground that has your laundry closed, that's going to affect my decision whether to stay there or not. And I need to know that. And I'm probably going to be calling you for that information. So all of those questions that people are calling you and asking you about, if they're not on your website, I think you're really falling down on the job, and you need to get them on your website, because people are being a little bit more careful, scrutinizing where they go. I think on both sides. I think people that think that this pandemic is nothing to worry about, I think they're also scrutinizing, what's going on. And they'll deal with a modicum of rules and new changes, but they don't want to end up paying, your $65 a night for 0 amenities, and all they get is the campsite, and you've got everything closed. So I think there's sort of a give and take with that as well.
Kara, what are you seeing up in Canada? Is there a broad spectrum here with people who are going above and beyond, people who are just getting by, or is everybody just kind of in the middle together?
Are you talking campground owners or consumers?
Campground owners, like what they're doing to either advertise or clean, or are they following government restrictions, or are they going above and beyond? Or are they doing less? Are they trying to do the porta potty thing?
I find there's a spectrum for sure. The porta potty thing is a new one for me. I haven't heard that one. But for the most part, I mean, our provinces have done a really fabulous job at getting lots of really clear guidelines out to us by this point. We've got, every province has a set of usually a few pages long of specific requirements of private campgrounds to operate. And I think that's been really helpful in terms of clarity. Some of them are more behind than others. In Ontario, where we're seeing more, higher numbers of cases and things like that, the private campgrounds and the public parks are maybe just opening or have only opened in the last week or couple of weeks. But for the most part, I mean, campground owners want to be safe. They want to give their customers the best experiences possible at this point. And everybody wants to be open and operating. So no, they're not going to take any extreme risks to potentially, have to close their doors again, which would be a huge hurdle. Oh, we lost Jason, I think. I was going to ask him about national parks, and I know up here, the national and provincial parks have been really busy the last few weeks since they've opened. And I was just wondering if that was kind of the case down there. Exponentially busy, like Disneyland busy.
Right. He might be back. He was losing signal when he was walking around, so maybe he just lost signal for a second or something. But in the meantime, have you seen any parks up there in Canada that have gone above and beyond, like who've done extra things in order to attract people?
Oh yeah, there's lots of really, really great campground owners in Canada that are doing, unique, cool things with maybe their restaurant, cafe spaces for takeout and broadening their menus. And, I'm seeing cool, like, social distance rib nights and so activity stuff. But yeah, lots of, safety precautions. Lots of parks are choosing to maybe spread out their capacity, reduce their capacities, and spread out their site usage a little bit, which I think gives a sense of comfort to campers for sure. Yeah, everywhere I've been in several campgrounds in the last couple of months. There's, hand sanitizing stations everywhere, and tons of signage and staff in masks providing information, and all of those things I think really demonstrate you know, a commitment to keeping everybody safe.
It makes you feel safer too as a traveler, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are still seeing some of the provinces are still restricting, um, you know, province to province travel, crossing those provincial borders. So in some places you still only have locals using those campground spaces, but for the most part, I mean, private campgrounds are certainly here in Alberta. Private campgrounds are accepting guests from outside of our province, and I mean, we're not seeing any sort of spike in numbers and those kinds of things. I mean, fingers crossed that we don't get there, but yeah, I think everybody's doing a really great job. I'm proud. I was nervous, but yeah, it's going well.
I think I'm so curious here, just real quick, Ben. Sorry, I want to ask Kara one more question.
Mhm.
Just to put you on the spot a little bit, Kara. What do you think the difference is, in your opinion, between why Alberta has not had the spike that some of the United States have?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, a large portion of the province is quite rural and small town and things like that. Um, and I don't know. I think for the most part, we're pretty good at following rules and you know, we have a pretty large population of seniors and things like that. We're all pretty conscious of keeping them safe. Obviously, we have people who aren't going to follow those rules. I don't know, to be honest. I think things like population density and all of that really impact those numbers. And I think the government closures really kind of mitigated, you know, when everything was closed, you couldn't go out and that probably helped as well.
Yeah.
I think Jason's back. If you want to ask him your question, he's muted still. But if you want to ask him your question, Kara.
Yeah, I'll ask him my question. Oh, he's muted. Can we unmute him? Oh, there we go.
There we go. Sorry, my phone overheated. It shut down. So we were nicely overcast, and then the sun came out and beat down on my phone and shut it off. So I'm back.
I was just going to ask you, Jason, about your national and state parks, and if you're seeing. I know here in Canada, we're seeing now that they've just opened in the last few weeks, we're seeing tons of traffic in those spaces. I was in a park, took my kids hiking last weekend, and I've never seen so many people on the trail before. Are you seeing really busy, you know, lots of traffic in those spaces? And if so, does it impact whether or not you visit, whether you decide
it does. So we're trying to go to some of the not as popular places right now. But the ones we have gone to, we have seen a decent number of people. We're trying to go on weekdays and during the day, and the National Park Service is doing a fantastic job of really taking care of the people that are visiting and making sure that everyone's doing it in a safe way. And then in the very, very popular parks, they're implementing timed entries like Rocky Mountain and Yosemite National Park, especially parks that are busy, but everybody has to be densely crowded into a certain area. I think people look at these parks and they're like, you know, it's I don't even know 100,000 square miles, and you know, what better place for social distancing? But they don't realize that everybody congregates at trailheads and overlooks and restrooms. Yeah. So we went to Mesa Verde National Park several times, and that's kind of a not super popular park. It's often overlooked by people, and I will say it wasn't that busy, and we were able to, you know, go a whole day without seeing more than 10-12 people. But like when we were in Sedona, it's not really national park, but like the busy trailheads in Sedona, those were super busy, and after doing one of those, we avoided them afterwards because there's just a lot of people out and about looking to do that. You know, the parks are it really hasn't been that long since they've reopened. The campgrounds have mostly just started to reopen. A lot of other federal and state campgrounds are just reopening, or they're reopening in different ways. Some of them have every other site blocked off, that type of stuff. This campground that we're in right now, 100% booked, and that's pretty normal for Colorado state parks in the summer.
Right.
But they're busy. Luckily, I think that's kind of one reason why we're at a park like this, is that there is a lot of space between sites, and even though that it is full, we're not near people.
Yeah.
And that does play a little bit into what we look at where we go. But I think most of the public spaces are doing a great job to keep people separated. I think people are doing a decent job of policing it a little bit on their own. Even if people aren't in agreement with social distancing and wearing masks and all that, they're generally respectful enough to know that other people are, and to stay away from them. So I think it's going okay. We'll see as we continue to go out. I think a lot of people are just really starting to visit these places because, after things are shut down, it takes a little time for that travel to ramp up and for people to actually get out on the road. And I think we're really right now just seeing the beginning of the influx of all these people. And I don't know, we'll see how it goes.
Are you seeing lots of rental RVs out there? When I was out in my national park that's near my place, I think in one parking lot there was 60 parking stalls and 40 of them were.
Oh wow. Yes, I'm seeing and again, we're in Colorado and Arizona, and these are areas where there are often lots of rentals, but I am seeing lots of rentals. I'm seeing lots of Cruise Americas out here, and a lot of people doing this for the first time. A lot of people renting an RV, and then they've got like several cars, and they're maybe have multiple tents, and then one RV to use as like bathrooms and stuff. So you're seeing like larger groups traveling together, but maybe they would have gone to hotels otherwise, but they're bringing this RV along with them so they can have a bathroom and a kitchen. That's kind of what I'm thinking is what I'm seeing. Whether the data agrees with that or not is yet to be seen. But it seems like people are just trying to have a kitchen and bathroom with them wherever they can.
When I went tent camping a few weeks ago, and the trails were pretty clear at the state park where I went tent camping, but the beaches were completely packed. So I think sometimes the beaches can be a hot point too, I guess.
We went to a beach in Durango, and we turned around and left before getting out on it. It was even though there were signs everywhere that said you must wear masks, nobody was wearing. We were the only people there wearing masks. The beach was packed, and it was small. And even though we had already paid to get out there, we just decided against it and turned around and left. And I think that's really the only time that we've really felt super uncomfortable about something. But I think beaches people get this idea again that a beach is somewhere where they can stay away from people.
But when everybody gets the same idea.
Exactly. And this was a Wednesday afternoon, and it was full.
I guess I always, it's just interesting how many different areas campground owners have to keep an eye on at their private parks. And I know some states are trying, and even the federal government, I believe, is looking at immunity legislation as far as trying to get some protection for businesses from lawsuits. But, I think the best thing is just to keep an eye on everything you possibly can and do the best you can to keep everyone social distance. And at a beach and like a pool area, that's just extremely difficult. So
it really is. Again, a lot of people think it doesn't sound difficult, and a lot of campgrounds have beaches too. And it's any of those places where they congregate, playgrounds. I don't think we've run across. Well, we have run across one open playground, but for the most part, campgrounds are keeping their playgrounds shut because I think that's where they draw the line. It's like children, and having to sanitize that play area. But there's a lot of stuff for campgrounds to think about, and a lot of them, no two campgrounds are alike. They all operate differently and have different needs and different issues for their customers and their staff.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that, Ben? Like, are you from the campgrounds that you've talked to, are most of them keeping their playgrounds closed?
Well, when the state park I went to, I think here in Indiana, the playgrounds are open now. So they've been open for a month or at least 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. So, I mean, when my wife and I and our 4 kids went camping a couple weeks ago at a state park near our house, the playground is open and they had the volleyball going and the people were out playing on the playground. And I know, like, our city where we live here in Indiana, all the playgrounds opened up, and you go to we live in a city that's, we have a couple lakes right in the city limits, and so they have beaches and playgrounds open. I mean, over the weekend when it got really hot, those places were pretty busy. So obviously, from my perspective, we've been seeing a lot of that. I think it just depends on the state. Obviously, up in Michigan, where they're being a little bit more stricter, I think they have more rules on some of that stuff. So
let's flip this around for a second, Ben, because you're a parent of 4 kids. Does any of that concern you, letting your kids on a playground where other kids have just been, or congregating, or beaches, or like, take it from, your perspective? Do you have any concerns, or?
We're concerned. Obviously, we haven't been going to any playgrounds. We've been doing some different things. We like to disc golf, things where we can be a little bit more separated from people. So I think, just from my perspective, I think that's the kind that we live out in the country. So we don't have as much of a desire to go to a playground. We got 40 acres. I can't imagine living in town on a small lot, and you have 4 kids and trying to keep those kids occupied and not have a campground available. A park available is going to be difficult. So I feel for those people. And obviously, anytime you go camping, when everything's shut down and you're at the campground, it can get a little bit boring sometimes, I think, for some people. So I can understand why people want the playgrounds open, but you got to be safe about it too. So I guess John is trying to join us. Talbott, you're gonna have to unmute John. I think we were a victim of the time zone difference because he's on Central Time. So I put Eastern Time in the emails, but it's probably easy to miss. So I don't know if John's able to unmute or not. There you go. John,
Yeah,
can you hear us?
You can probably hear me now, can't you?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So you're in Texas right now, right, John?
That's correct. I was just in
Okay.
Houston Saturday.
Okay. And you told me that you've been through quite the ringer as far as, I believe you were in Tennessee when the virus started, and now you're in Texas. So I guess what happened to get you to this point?
Let's see here. We were in Tennessee doing the Christmas light installation when this first COVID thing hit. Of course, Tennessee at the time just thought it was a bad flu, so they just shut down the schools, and everybody else was just fine. They were doing their usual things. And then we think we may have already had the virus. My wife, my 3 sons, and myself were all sick at the end of January, and we were sick for about a month. Then we finally pulled out. We went to Florida just to take a break for a month or so. And, of course, COVID hit down there, and things started getting crazy there, so we left there. And we went to Texas, to South Padre Island area. South Padre, I don't know if you guys have heard, that's one of the worst places in the United States you could possibly be. They actually brought in some freezer trucks the other day to keep up with the demand of the bodies.
I haven't heard anything about South Padre Island. John, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm curious now because there are a lot of large campgrounds in South Padre. Ben, have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything specifically about South Padre, but I know Texas some areas of
We've
Texas
heard
are pretty rough.
Houston and Dallas and San Antonio.
Yeah.
Not really so much about Austin, but John, so tell us about, we're curious, tell us about South Padre.
South Padre, it's actually not that large. I mean, there's only like 3 campgrounds on the island itself. And then you get off the island and into the Port Isabel area, which is the mainland. There's a lot of small mom and pop campgrounds. They've been there like 30 years. They're old. A lot of 55 and older places. In fact, that's what we were in, was a 55 and older campground. And when we got there, about 2 days after we got there, is when Cameron County got on total lockdown. There was police roadblocks. You had to check in and out. You had to say who you were, what you were doing, why you were there. And of course, all these little mom and pop campgrounds, they actually locked their gates. You had to lock yourself in and out. It got that bad. Walmart, you couldn't stand for more than 2 people at a time to go into Walmart to get supplies. It was really crazy. Things let up a little bit after about 2 to 3 weeks. They let up a little bit because, basically the locals were threatening to revolt. So we actually got out to go over to Mexico for a day, the Nuevo Progreso. And it was even weird over there. They were checking your temperatures, asking where you were, where you were from, who you were, took your driver's license, your information. It was really strange. I mean, it's just the how tight everything was down there. And then when we left down there and came up here, where I'm now in East Texas in the Nacogdoches area, it's totally different up here. There's no real social distancing. Nobody's wearing masks. There's cases of COVID everywhere up here. I don't understand it after going through what we've been through down there.
So John, before you got on, we were talking to Jason, and Ben and Kara and I were talking a little bit about how the discrepancy of different states do different things, locations do different things, cities, health departments, whatever. Do you feel like that, especially if you just talked about the huge discrepancy between what they were doing in South Padre and where you are now, do you feel like there would be a bigger benefit if there was a consistent federal policy that just said this is what you should be doing across all states?
My honest opinion, from what I've seen, yes. It's that bad. This virus is that bad. We really do need a nationwide one rule, one setup. Because here in Texas, it's strange. The county judges actually have more power than the governor. A county judge can sign off and say, okay, everybody in this county, you're locked down. You're not going anywhere. And that's what happened down there in Cameron County and Starr County and Hidalgo County, all right along that border. They basically said, okay, I don't care what the governor says. This is my county. We're locking you down. And this is tough. That's it. You're locked down. And that's exactly what happened. And then once the governor said, okay, we're going to start phasing in restaurants. We're going to start phasing in being able to go to beaches and stuff. Memorial Day weekend is a prime example. We had, I think they said, I want to say it was like 60,000 people on the island on one day. Now, this island is not that big. I think the population of South Padre is only about 5,000 or 6,000 people. Imagine 60,000 people coming in all at once to a town of 10,000 people or whatever.
Right.
And then it was just like a wildfire. Like 2 weeks later, all of a sudden you start hearing these COVID cases worse and worse. Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. All these people came down to that little island and just congregated. No masks, no social distancing, nothing. And it just took off like wildfire. It was crazy. That's probably we had a chance to get out. We got out.
That's what's kind of happened in Corpus Christi now too, right? I was reading about over the weekend. Yeah.
So I guess.
Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
So I guess how has this impacted? I think you told me a little bit. How has this impacted? You're a work camper, so you work in RV. I guess how has this impacted your ability to get a job and to travel around and find work?
Right now, actually, when I got to South Padre, that area, I had a job. It lasted about 4 days. And then, of course, they locked down the whole area, and my job just basically went away. Luckily for me, my wife has a sewing business that she does online. She actually sews for some other people. They mail us the stuff. We put it together and mail it direct to the customer. If it hadn't been for that, we'd have been up the creek, man. It'd have been bad. We'd have been broke. We had a little bit of savings. But if she hadn't had that job coming in, I don't know what we'd have done. Right now, I do have a job. It's just waiting on it come October 1st in Tennessee to do Christmas lights installations for Christmas decor. It'd be my 3rd year with that company. I just spoke to him the other day. it finally hit home for him. He was kind of in the sand about this COVID virus, and one of his pastors died from it just a few days ago. A young man, 50 years old. He went in the hospital, and a week later he was gone. And it finally hit reality for him. So I'm not sure what we're going to do when we get to Tennessee, because a lot of commercial businesses may not be doing it again this year. So we may be doing a lot of private homes, the way he's looking at it.
So I know Ben had asked you to come on to talk about some of the work camping and how that impacts your decision of where to go and what to do. Do you feel, I mean, is that a big concern for you when you're looking for your next park to go? Are you purposely hot spots?
Most definitely. I have a 17-year-old son who has an immunodeficiency, plus he has celiac, Marfan's disease, he's got a heart disease. So his health is not that great. It's one of the reasons why we hit the road, because we don't know how much time we're going to have with our son. It's that serious. He has a disease called dysautonomia. It's the area of the brain that controls your heart rate, heartbeat, breathing. Any given time, his brain could just say, "Hey, I'm not gonna do this anymore," and he could die. So he's real susceptible to diseases like COVID. So we do plan where we're going. We social distance a lot, just for the simple fact of what he has. So obviously we wouldn't go to Houston, work in Houston or Dallas or New York or anything like that. So yeah, it really does dictate where we go.
Okay. Do you come into contact with a lot of other work campers? I mean, either at the parks that you've been to or not, to kind of give us a sense of whether that's the sentiment overall, or is that kind of still?
I'm not sure, because recently, the past 2 to 3 months, we haven't really worked, so we haven't really dealt with any work campers. Most of the campgrounds we've stayed in, like I said, the one in South Padre, it was run by a retired military guy, and all the people in that campground were all retired military people. So when they hear an order, they basically take it to heart. They lock everything down. They follow orders. Right now, I'm in Nacogdoches. It's another old campground here. Very spread apart. Nobody's on top of each other. Everybody just sort of minds their own business, stays to themselves, almost like a retirement community here. So we're probably the youngest one here. I know I'm the only one here with kids. So I run into that a lot.
Have you tried to look for work where you're at as a work camper, or have you looked in other locations for potential work?
I have. I've been checking out Florida. Of course, Florida's a hot spot right now, so that kind of rules that out. We thought about trying Utah. Utah's hot. I actually worked in New Mexico for a while. I have some friends that run a campground up there. New Mexico, the minute you step foot in there, automatic 2-week lockdown, self-isolation.
Well, so Jason was actually telling us about that earlier. You don't have to stay for 14 days. It's 14 days or less, the duration of your stay, right, Jason?
Yeah, but if you're going to be working there, obviously you need to lock down for 14 days.
Right, if you're going to stay there anytime.
But if you're going to be working there, you would expect to have a job at least 2 weeks, right? I mean,
I would hope so.
Okay, all right. So
now, if I had to, I could go to work right now here in Nacogdoches. I'm actually a mechanic, and I lived here for many years, about 7 or 8 years. In fact, my youngest son was born in this county. I could go to work for a friend of mine at a garage, turning wrenches if I absolutely had to. So,
Jason, have you come across any people working at the state parks or national parks or private parks where you've been?
Yeah, there are definitely, in this campground we're at right now, there are definitely work campers doing their thing. I know it was a lot of the work campers I've talked to that were planning on working in state and federal parks. I mean, I don't even know how many federal parks there are in this country, but it's got to be near 10,000. Most of them either were told that their job wasn't happening when this came down, or that they were in a holding pattern. I think a lot of the campgrounds that rely on work campers have been struggling to ramp back up with these people, because they have to go back and find new people. And a lot of the people that were plan every year to be on the road during the summer or in a specific campground work camping had to make alternative plans. But so it looks like, I guess my point here is that it looks like that the work campers that we have come across are working really hard. And I'm sure some campgrounds are, maybe taking that into consideration, paying people more and because they I think they need the support right now. But there are work campers out there doing their thing.
I know.
Go ahead.
I know. We just did a. We just did a story on employment in the campground industry, and I know a lot of campground owners are dealing with the loss of the foreign students, and they're trying to fill, those positions. And I know a lot of the ones we spoke with said that, there is a little bit of a competition for work campers in some regards because, they're looking for so many hours and that maybe a private park can't get them, or they're looking for a certain pay level. And I know some private park owners are raising their pay and doing more to try to attract those work campers that want to come and work. But there's also plenty that just don't want to travel right now too. So that we heard from. So I guess, Kara, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was going to ask Kara what she was seeing with the work campers up in Canada, just if that's changed their mindset or their calculations or where they're willing to go.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of factors that people are starting to consider now. A lot of our snowbirds work camp in the States in the wintertime, and there's rumblings now that, we may see a border closure into the wintertime. So obviously that will impact, their work plans. When I owned a park, I had 2 work campers who snowboarded in the winter in Arizona. I was just talking with one of them the other day, and he's concerned because he's been working at the same campground in Arizona for years and years every winter, and now is obviously having to stay here in Canada for the winter, and so there's obviously loss of income, but also, the majority of our campgrounds aren't open in the winter, so he has to kind of find alternative accommodations and things like that. So and I think those things are quite common with snowbirds, especially. Currently, I know several parks that normally hire work campers who their staffing was absolutely impacted by closures and border lockdown and all of that. So, they're short-staffed and unable to find, especially in those rural communities, unable to find staff to take those positions that they normally fill with work campers. So, it's impacting them at a time when not only do they have all of these extra, they've got to enforce pools and beaches and all of those things that they maybe didn't normally need staff for, but now on top of it, have far less people to choose from in the employment pool.
Yeah. Wow.
I think you bring up an interesting point about the winter too for full-timers as well. Obviously a lot of campgrounds in Canada and the northern states are closed in the winter, and a lot of full-timers, their rigs aren't able to, they don't physically can't be in a winter area, they'll freeze over. They're not set up for that. So if they can't travel to some of these southern states where they go every single winter, that's going to be a really big challenge that might hit us later this year.
We're already,
or they might have to go to one of the southern states and they don't necessarily want to, but there's no other place they have because they've got to make a living.
We're certainly preparing already in terms of conversations with local, municipalities and things like that who are talking about wanting to keep campgrounds open later into the season and things like that, which just isn't possible in terms of infrastructure and those kinds of things here with the way our weather is. So we are bracing for the border remaining closed and having a ton of, thousands of snowbirds who normally head south here in Canada is kind of stuck here, and where are they going to go, and what does RV storage and all of those things look like through the winter months until the border is reopening.
John, I guess, what's that look like for you? Like, if you can't get to Tennessee, or you ever get to a point where you aren't able to find that work that you need, do you have a house or somewhere where you can go besides the RV?
Nope, that's it. I have an RV and that's it. Luckily, it's a 96 Newmar. It's a 4-season rig. We bought it used, of course. It seems like I work on it about every other day, but it gets me to where I need to go. Tennessee, fortunately, the guy I'm working for, he is not going to shut down. But also, it's hard to find winter campgrounds in Tennessee. There's only a few of them that will stay open year-round there. We're outside of Knoxville. There's a couple there that are open year-round. But I have found the further north you go, the more campgrounds are not open. We worked in North Dakota, Grand Forks area, did a beet harvest about 3 years ago. And we had a really hard time up there because basically you hit October and they cut the water off. You got nothing. So you got 5 people in a rig and no water. It's not good.
Nope. So, wow. So I guess, Jason, what are you hearing? Are you hearing any concerns about the snowbirds moving south this winter? Or are you talking with full-time RVers who are still planning on heading south for the winter, or are they making other plans?
I haven't heard a ton of people talking about it yet. I think that's, I'm sure that's on some people's minds,
Yeah.
and a lot of people, even if they have a home, their home might not be set up for winter. They close it up for the winter. But I think what we're going to see, I think the bigger challenge over this idea of not being able to travel or being forced to travel is the influx of people traveling, and that we might see campgrounds overbooked in the winter, especially if there are states that don't open their schools back up for several months into the school year, that sort of stuff. We're going to continue to see more people
on the road.
People traveling, if their job doesn't come back, and they've got savings, we're going to see more people doing this. We all know that RVs are being sold left and right now, and they can barely keep them on the lots. So I think that's kind of the bigger concern, is that are all the campgrounds in the warmer climates going to be totally booked? Are we going to see tons and tons of newbies boondocking when they have no experience doing it, and maybe not taking care of the land very well, that sort of stuff? Those are kind of the challenges that I see going forward.
I know I've read some stories about where state and Army Corps parks and stuff have been shut down because people were abusing the property or whatever. So hopefully people get a little bit more respectful of these areas too when they visit. So,
Yeah.
So I guess I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. I just kind of wanted
to tell us.
What?
We're in charge. You're supposed to tell us when the end is.
I guess, Jason, I just kind of wanted, I think somebody had asked on Facebook, just kind of give us your, I guess, perspective of what the future is going to look like, I guess, for RVing. I know there's a lot of question marks. Do you still feel that there's pretty strong, market? Are you feel like you're going to see a lot of RVs traveling around the country for the rest?
Yeah, I think it's going to be stronger than ever for a while. And I was skeptical. I will say, I think that a lot of the people in the industry were super bullish on sales this year when they started to pick up after cruise ships shut down, after hotels shut down, airlines shut down. I think the dominoes haven't all fallen yet. I mean, I think people are in this country are going to have a lot of financial issues. People that haven't had jobs and businesses that have closed and stuff. So, that's never good for the RV industry when extra cash isn't readily available. But those people that do have it are buying RVs right now, and they're traveling heavily. What we're seeing, I think that will continue. I think there are going to be issues with overbooking of campgrounds. There's just not the number of new, even before the pandemic, the number of new RVers in the last few years. Campground development hasn't really, in my opinion, and you guys are kind of more the experts on this, it hasn't really kept up with that. I think we're seeing a lot of campgrounds older campgrounds being bought and refurbished, which is awesome. But we're not seeing a lot of brand new campgrounds out there, especially in the state and federal park system. And I think that's going to be a challenge, and maybe that might turn some of these new RVers off of it, and maybe we'll see next year a big influx of used RVs for sale. I don't know, but I do know that people are going to be nervous about getting on airplanes for a while. People are going to be nervous about getting on cruise ships for a while, and they still want to get out and travel. They want to see the country, and they're doing it. And like with anything, it's complicated. There are lots of things that feed into it, but generally, I think we're going to see a lot of RVers in the near future, because they just want, like I said earlier, they just want that kitchen and bathroom with them. You know, they want to be able to clean it themselves. They don't want to have to go in somewhere. They're okay with traveling. They're okay with getting out there. They're okay with being within a responsible distance of other people. They're not comfortable going into public restrooms. They're not comfortable having, just sitting in a restaurant, perhaps. And, or they know that things could get locked down again. So I think RVs are very, very attractive for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Brian, Carrie, you guys got any more questions or anything else you want to talk about, or?
No, I'm good. I really appreciate you coming on, Jason. Really appreciate Ben finding you. Hopefully we can stay in touch, have a communication, just because you gave a really good perspective. You went in depth. You talked about a lot of stuff. Really appreciate all your insights. John, you got here late, but same thing with you. I really appreciate what you were able to talk about and share with us, and it's important as we keep moving forward.
Yeah, John, just sorry, John, about the time. I think we got our times confused, I guess. I'm on Eastern, you're on Central. I think that probably played a role.
It may have. I apologize for that. That's, it happens. But I'm glad I was able to make it.
We're going to blame it on Ben because he's in Indiana.
Yeah.
And they don't even observe daylight.
Yeah, right.
It's really weird there. I can't blame you at all, John.
Yeah, Midwesterners are kind of strange. I lived in Nebraska for a while. They're different people up there,
It's really strange.
Well, thank you everyone for coming on, and thanks Jason and John for taking the time out. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your week and a good rest of your summer and good rest of your year. Hopefully, John, things work out for you with your travels and everything. So
I think they will. It's just it's part of this lifestyle. You just have to take it as it comes. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's why we live the way we do. It's not, we don't do it because it's the same thing every day. That's the whole reason why we do this.
Yeah. And Jason, I hope you and your kids continue to have safe travels as you go around the country and Colorado and different areas. So
that's the plan. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.